One of the most frequently asked questions is how and when to varnish a painting. The second most asked question is if the alkyd or retouch medium used in the painting process can be used as the final varnish. My answer is always that each product should be used for its intended purpose and not used for something it's not designed to do. The reason is for archival longevity of the painting. Painting mediums are not designed to protect the painting from dust or atmospheric pollutants, nor are they intended to be removed at some later date for cleaning or conservation purposes. If a painting stands the test of time, future collectors want the painting to be as archivally sound as the artist can make it. This means that the final protective layer of varnish should be one that can be safely removed without disturbing the paint layers underneath. If one used retouch or alkyd medium as a final protective layer, and subsequent conservators wish to remove the top protective layer, there would be no way for them to remove only the portion that was the surface layer. The possibility also exists that they would remove glazes or other paint layers that also contained these products. The only way to assure that the surface is distinctly different than the painting medium used in the painting process is to use a product designed specifically as the final varnish for the painting, such as Damar Varnish. This means that I recommend you never use your painting medium as your final protective varnish layer. Damar Varnish is made from true Singapore white Damar gum and yields a high gloss and strong protection while greatly increasing the brilliance of the colors. Another question I'm frequently asked is whether to use high gloss, semi-gloss, or matte varnish. The answer depends on the key of the painting. If the painting has many dark passages or is painted with many transparent layers of paint, then the choice is the high gloss varnish. If the painting is a very high key composition made of mostly very light values, then the semi-gloss or matte varnishes are acceptable choices. Since the semi-gloss and matte varnishes contain wax, the brilliance of the colors would be dulled in a low-key or dark painting, but the high-key or light-value paintings would not be affected as much. I personally prefer the high-gloss varnish for all types of paintings, high or low-key. And if you visit your local art museum, you'll find that the great paintings of the past all are varnished with high-gloss varnish. Many people make a mistake in applying the varnish by trying to do it in just one or two layers. If you apply a single thick layer of varnish, it will have an enamel look which is not very attractive and too reflective. The way to properly varnish a painting is to do it in many, very thin layers using a large, soft brush. How many layers are required to bring the painting surface into a unified level of reflectivity depends on the composition of the paint on the canvas. Some paint absorbs the varnish more readily and dries with a matte look. You might have to apply varnish in spots in more layers than in others. When to apply the varnish is another question I frequently am asked. The container will always advise you to wait at least 6 months before applying the final varnish layers. This gives the thickest applied paint an adequate amount of time to thoroughly dry. If you paint thinly all over your painting, then it might be ready for varnishing sooner, but it's best to follow the manufacturer's directions and wait 6 months before applying the final varnish. So what do you do in the meantime if you must send a painting to a gallery or sell it to someone? I recommend that you spray a single white layer of retouch varnish on the painting and advise the gallery or patron that the painting must receive its final varnish layer in 6 months. I also make it the responsibility of the buyer to return the painting to the artist for this final varnishing. When you do apply this protective layer, choose a day when the humidity is low. If you live in a dry climate, this is not an issue. But if you live near any of the coastal areas of the United States, humidity can be a real issue. If moisture is trapped between the paint and varnish layer, it might bloom, which means that it'll take on a cloudy appearance. The only remedy for this is to remove the varnish, which is a tricky job at best. It's much better to wait until a day of low humidity than to try and rescue a painting in bloom. It should take several days to properly apply the thin layers of varnish. Each layer should be allowed to dry 24 hours before applying the next. To be sure that the varnish goes on in a thin layer, it can be thinned slightly with turpentine to make it flow more easily. Brush it on in the same direction until you cover the entire painting. The first layer can be applied vertically. The next day, apply the second layer horizontally and alternate the application of layers until you've built a sufficient number of layers.